So just a little bit of a background about me. I was born in Kenya, in case you're wondering where the accent is from. Kenya is in East Africa, and I was born in a Catholic mission hospital. And the midwife who helped my mom have me was Italian. And because it was Easter Sunday, she said, oh, you must call her Paskwa. And that's how I got my name. So I grew up in a Catholic home, and I was baptized as a child. But for the longest time, I just took my faith for granted. I just went in and out of church and didn't really take it seriously until when I was 13 years old. I remember attending Mass, and the priest was talking about the parable of the sower. And I don't know whether it's something he said or I don't know what happened that day, but I just decided to take my faith a little more seriously. And in terms of my career also had an interesting beginning. I remember it was my last year of university. My friends and I in the engineering class had spent the whole night trying to finish our assignment, like we often did. And when we walked out, we noticed people all dressed up, heading off to the student center. And we asked them what was going on, only to learn that an internet service provider was there that day doing interviews on campus. And we went right back to the lab and polished up our resumes. And I remember I was the last one to print my resume. The toner was gone, and I just got like a very faint gray resume printed and ran back to residence. As I was ironing my outfit, the only interview outfit I had, I burnt a big hole in my skirt. So I was like, this is not happening. But anyway, fortunately the top was long, so I covered up the hole and just went praying that I hope the wind doesn't blow, I hope I don't raise anything, that the interviewer may see the big hole. But anyway, I got the job. And since then I've been working in different places, mainly in technology, and over the last few years I've been in the non-profit world. So when I think about this, the topic for today, which is my boss made me do it, I just think of Winston Churchill's, one of his most famous and often misquoted speeches. Some people think he said never give up, but what he actually said was never given, never given, never, never, never in nothing, big or small, never given except to convictions of honor and good sense. And he went on to say never give it, never yield to force, never yield to the apparently overwhelming might of the enemy. But then I ask myself, how can I do that? When it comes to ethics in the workplace, how can I not give in? If my boss says you have to do it, how can I not do it? And so one thing that has really encouraged me is one of my favorite verses in the Bible, or passages in the Bible, is from the letter of Paul to the Corinthians. So it's familiar to most of us. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 that talks about love, where Paul goes on to say love is patient and kind. So the one that I like the best, he says, 3 things last forever, and this is faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of them is love. And the reason I really like this is because when I think about ethics in the workplace, there are several things that make us give in to compromising our values. The first one is just being unsure. You don't know what you're supposed to do in a certain situation. Maybe your faith hasn't spelled it out, or maybe it's been spelled out, but different people have different opinions. So if you're unsure, then you become very vulnerable, and it's easy to give in, even though you have a nagging feeling, I shouldn't be doing this. The other thing that causes us to compromise on our values and do something our boss tells us to do, even if we don't believe it, is the price. Sometimes the price to pay for not doing it is really high. And the third thing is purely fear. We're just so scared of the consequences. So for me, when I come back to faith, hope, and love, it just helps me. If I'm uncertain, I just need to go dig up and find what does my faith have to say about this. And if it's not clear, ask people. So as an example, if we look at where all this started, in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were in the garden and the serpent came to tempt Eve. His question to Eve was, did God really say? And Eve started the debate, and the question again was, did God really say? And so the serpent took advantage of her uncertainty and introduced doubt, and that made Eve really, really vulnerable, and she gave in. And if I look at my own life, my first ethical dilemma at work happened when I worked for this internet service provider and I managed servers that took care of the billing data. Is any of us here working in IT or studying computer science or anything like that? Not technology people here? Okay. Just one? Two? Okay. So anyway, all the billing information was in this system, and then I went on vacation, and when I was gone, the server crashed. And they tried to get the information from backups. We do backups every night, and they're supposed to work when you need them, and they didn't work. So when I got back, my boss said, Paskwa, you need to sort this problem out, otherwise you're not getting paid this month. I just come from vacation, stacked up a whole amount of debt I needed to repay. And so, although the question was not directly do something bad, I was tempted because I desperately needed the money. So I remember, because I had sort of drifted away from my faith and I wasn't really following my faith very well. For one time I had to go back and say, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I knelt down and asked God, what do I do in this situation? And I remember reading from Romans 4, chapter 4, which says, a worker's wage is their right. So if you work, you ought to get paid for it. And I realized it's not right for my boss to say I will not be paid, even though a mistake was made. So I had to go back and think of a solution that would both get me paid and also solve the problem in a way that wouldn't compromise people, either by lying to clients or whatever. So anyway, finally the solution we came up with was to look at previous history around the same time of year. What did those clients, what was their bill like? So do an estimate, write them a letter to let them know what had happened, and also offer them a discount. And then at the end of the day, it had a happy ending, but I realized at that time that my values and my faith were really important to me. So given it was my first job, I really didn't have a choice of looking like, is this company aligned with my faith? But going forward, any other place I've worked, I've sort of looked at what does this organization stand for. And I've often had to turn away jobs which I felt it will be too much of a conflict and it'll be too hard to choose the right thing to do. So I think when faced with uncertainty, we have to respond in faith. And when I talk about faith, I'll just ask a question. How many of us believe that Nick Walenda crossed the Niagara on a tightrope in 2012? How many of us believe that? Quite a few of us believe that. Yeah, okay, perfect. Now, if Nick Walenda was to come here today and ask for volunteers to cross the Niagara with him on that same tightrope, how many of us would cross with him? Anybody? Nobody? Oh my gosh. If there was one person who would say yes, you would cross, I would say that's faith. Because faith is not simply believing. A lot of us believe that. And given maybe many of us don't have the ambition to ever cross the Niagara on a tightrope, but when there's something important for us in our lives, let's say I'm watching that YouTube clip about how to lose weight, and they're talking about all these ideas for diet and exercise. I can sit there and believe what they're saying as much as I want to, but I'll get no results until I get off my behind and go do what they say. So faith is not just about believing, faith is acting on what we believe in. So when I talk about faith, I don't just mean going to find out what it means and what it says, but it has to be important to us. So that's faith, and that's how I think I would deal with uncertainty. The other thing is price. A lot of times we may know what our faith has asked us to do in a situation, and we may actually do it, but then we have to pay the price for it. Maybe we lose our job or whatever. And a great example in the Bible is Joseph. When Joseph was sold by his brothers as a slave in Egypt, he had to work in Potiphar's house. I'm hoping we're all familiar with the story. And Potiphar thought he was the greatest looking guy she had ever met. And she tried so many times to get Joseph to get into bed with her. And he would always say no, no, no. And finally one day, when it was just the two of them in the house, she managed to sort of trap him, but he ran away and she was left with his robe. And we all know he had to go to jail for that. So sometimes when we stand up for our faith, there's a price to pay. But lucky enough for Joseph, there was a happy ending. Eventually he ended up getting out of jail and being the prime minister of Egypt and helping his brothers. So it had a happy ending. But all I'm saying is sometimes faith is not enough, and when the price is high, we have to hang on to something else. And for me, that's hope. That's where this whole idea of faith and hope, just hope that things will be okay even if things go bad. And one example we have, like in politics, is Mandela, the late Mandela, who had to fight for against the apartheid regime in South Africa. One of the things he said when he was arrested, he told the judge that this ideal I have is something I hope to live for, but it needs to be something I'm willing to die for. And this hope helped him stay in jail for 27 years, and eventually South Africa did get free. Eventually the goal was met. So sometimes we need to hang on, even if things don't work out. So I have an example. My husband had a friend who worked in the US for a company that manufactured vitamins, and he was the manufacturing manager of one of the plants. So his boss asked him to sort of tweak the chemicals so that they could I hope everyone can hear me okay. I know it's a little bit noisy. But anyway, his boss asked him to tweak the chemical proportions so that they could make more vitamins with less chemicals. But then he said, but if I do that, then the vitamins will not be effective anymore. So his boss said, okay. Now, my husband's friend, his name was Steve, he had to go home to attend a funeral. So when he came back, he found that somebody else had been appointed to be the manager of the manufacturing plant. And 4 days after, he was fired from his job. So, I mean, sometimes you have a price to pay, but good for Steve, he managed to sue his company, and he was paid damages worth $2.1 million. So I guess what all I'm saying is, although sometimes it may look really bad, if you have hope, although things may be bad for a little bit, there may be light at the end of the tunnel. However, sometimes that may not be the case. It's not that always there's a happy ending. Sometimes it can be really tough, and for me, I think that's where love comes in. And I'm not talking about the kind of love that, I don't know if any of us knows Rosette's song, It Must Have Been Love, but it's over now. So I'm not talking about that kind of love. I'm talking about the kind of love that's unrelenting, unyielding, the kind of love Mother Teresa showed when she continued to help someone, even if it was so obvious this person was going to die. And I think love is what inspires us to have faith in the first place. Love is what makes us have hope. And I think Jesus really showed us a real example of love. Just by him coming and living like us, living our lives, having to die on the cross because of love for us and love for his Father. But how do we, ordinary people, how can we have that kind of love? So, in the letter of John, the epistle of John, 1 John 4:17 to 19, this is what John says. And as we live in God, our love grows more perfect. So we will not be afraid on the day of judgment, but we can face him with confidence because we live like Jesus here in this world. Such love has no fear because Perfect love expels all fear. If we're afraid, it is for fear of punishment. This shows that we have not fully experienced His perfect love. We love each other because He first loved us. So in essence, God loved us first, and He gives us strength to love Him back. So given there may be situations where it is really difficult. If you're a doctor, how many of us are doctors here or training to be doctors? Anybody? Or maybe you're in the pharmaceutical world. Sometimes the ethics of the industry, like what's considered acceptable in the industry may be contrary to your faith, and sometimes it's a hard call to make. So I think that's where we just have to tap in to God to show us what to do and to give us the strength. So I'm just going to finalize this with a story, and I'm just hoping with the noise you'll hear, because it's a bit of a long story, so maybe what I'll do is summarize. But this is a story of a basketball player. I don't know how many of us know John Tel Franklin? Those who love basketball. So anyway, I'll just read the story and hope it'll make sense. So when John Tel Franklin's mother lost her battle with cancer on February 7, 2009, no one is surprised to hear that Franklin, a senior forward for the Milwaukee Madison High School basketball, was not going to play in his team's game that day against another high school. But then he showed up. Midway through the second quarter, Franklin walked into the gym ready to play. The only problem was that his name hadn't been entered into the scorebook. This meant that if Franklin took the floor, his team would be assessed a technical two free throws for the declared team. The coach of the Madison team and the other coach both met with the game's referee, begging the referee to make an exception to the rules. Though the referee was sympathetic to the situation, he stressed the rules had to be followed regardless of the circumstances. That's when something truly special happened. When the ref would not budge, DeKalb's Darius McNeil volunteered to shoot the 2 free throws. When he turned to make his way to the line, Coach Roman called out, "You realize you're going to miss this, right?" And McNeil went on the line. The referee handed him the basketball. He said that he's free to take the shot, but instead of a perfectly executed free throw, McNeil shot the ball just 2 feet in front of him, and the ball slowly bounced out of bounds. The referee picked up the ball, handed it back to McNeil, and McNeil did the same thing for the second shot. The crowd responded with a standing ovation. Later on in the interview, someone commented, McNeil said, "I did it for the guy who lost his mom. It was the right thing to do." So sometimes the rules may tell you do this, but your faith or your conscience tells you do another. And I think that's where love has to be the inspiration. So just to end our speech, so I said, okay, like Winston Churchill said, never give in, never give in, never give in. If we are to never give in terms of our faith and work, I think really love has to be what guides us. So I'm just going to close with just reading a few verses from 1 Corinthians about what love is, and we can close our talk tonight. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wrong. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures in every circumstance. There are 3 things that will last forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of this is love. So whatever, I don't know what situations we are battling with right now, if anyone out there is having to make a choice today, I just hope this will be encouraging, and looking forward to great discussions later on about this. Thank you.